Okay, so hello and welcome back. Today we are finishing Baz's battles of the First Crusade. This will be the Battle of Ascalon. We just finished the Crusade for Jerusalem in the last video. So again, if you like this type of content, leave a like for me. My stuff's down below from a Patreon in case you want to support me there, and also Baz battles. All of his stuff's down there, and I suggest you go check it out. All right, well let's get to it.
It's the 11th of August of the year 1099. A large Fatimid army stops for a rest on the Palestinian coast. Its commander, Vizier al-Afdal, musters the troops and prepares for an upcoming siege. Yet he has no idea that the decisive encounter with the Latin invaders would not take place under the walls of Jerusalem. The last act of the First Crusade is about to begin. It's mid to late July of the year 1099. A couple of days had passed since the Frankish soldiers successfully stormed the city walls and captured Jerusalem, the ultimate goal of the Crusade. Once the dust had settled and the corpses of the defenders were burnt outside the walls, the European lords held a council to determine the fate of the Holy City. Just like in Antioch 1 year before, it was an unsurprising display of quarrels, various interests, and a general power struggle. The division between the distinct groups was even more visible after the singular purpose of the crusade was achieved. Since Bohemond stayed behind in Antioch, the two most influential leaders that still remained were Godfrey and Raymond, who competed to control the city. By the year 1099, the oath sworn to the Byzantine Emperor Alexios was widely disregarded by most of the Crusade leaders, and a king of Jerusalem was to be chosen.
This kind of makes sense, right? Because Byzantines didn't have much support, especially by the time they got Jerusalem. There basically was no Byzantine soldiers left, at least what the video is telling me. But yeah, at that point, like, no, we're not giving you this land.
The Latin lords held council, and the crown was initially offered to Raymond, the wealthiest and probably the most powerful of all leaders, who proved his piety and combat abilities in past encounters. Yet the Count of Toulouse once again demonstrated his nobility and humbly refused, stating that there shall not be a king where Christ alone reigned. Most likely he felt confident enough to play this game, being the most reasonable candidate. Moreover, his troops held the city's citadel, which, as in the case of Antioch, proved to be an important asset for Bohemond. Yet the
Yes, only Christ can be the true king, but I will also take the most politically powerful position and occupy the keep.
Latin leaders didn't try to convince Raymond for too long, and instead offered the crown to Godfrey of Bouillon, also a distinguished commander, and a popular candidate who was among the first to break through the Fatimid defense. Though Godfrey refused to become king as well, he gladly accepted the role of sole ruler of the city under the title Protector of the Holy Sepulchre.
Yes, because again, Christ can be the only king from where he was born, right? So, but obviously that's going to go away by the next king. I know that for a fact. But that's why they didn't want to be called the king initially instead of protector. Instead, they want to be protector of the Holy Sepulchre.
Much to Raymond's disdain. The latter realized that he was outmaneuvered, mostly by his overconfidence, and petulantly left the city, making a pilgrimage to the River Jordan. Godfrey took charge the 22nd of July and began to settle in as the new ruler of Jerusalem. Now, you may ask, why did they rush to choose a king so quickly? The answer lay to the southwest, 200 kilometers away. The vizier Al-Afdal Shahanshah of the Fatimid Caliphate of Egypt was halfway through the Sinai, marching to repel the Christians and reclaim Jerusalem. It's worth mentioning that Al-Afdal, though nominally the caliph's subordinate, was in fact the actual ruler of the Fatimids, having the underage caliph Al-Mustali serving as a mere figurehead. Prior to the Crusaders' arrival in the Levant, Al-Afdal waged a successful war against the Seljuk Turks and managed to capture southern Palestine. Yet as soon as he learned about the Crusade entering Anatolia, he made efforts to ally himself with the Latin army, presuming they were just Byzantine mercenaries having a common enemy in the Seljuks.
This is something that, again, the Muslims didn't. Okay, so we're taking a lot of history here. But the Muslims initially didn't realize what the hell they were doing. They thought they were, again, Byzantine mercenaries, basically. And even after they took Jerusalem and had the Crusader states, again, they just thought they were a whole bunch of mercenaries just sitting there. They didn't. They didn't think. Again, generally, they didn't think they were there for like a holy purpose or what the actual reason was. I thought they were basically just a bunch of mercenaries there for the gold and money. I mean, kind of was what they were there, kind of for, but for the Holy Land, right? And again, the Seljuks and these guys are fighting. They're not. These Muslims are not united, okay? And even after this, they aren't united until Salahuddin, and then he kicks the Crusaders out. But that's a long story short.
Both sides didn't quite understand each other, though. The Latin princes failed to notice any substantial difference between Shiite Fatimids and Sunni Seljuk Turks, while Al-Afdal apparently didn't understand the real purpose of the crusade. Thus, despite the Fatimid efforts, any cooperation between the two sides just didn't happen. Anyway, let's move our story forward. Godfrey and the others were aware of an impending encounter with the Fatimids and worked on a plan on how to overcome their upcoming problems. Entrenching in Jerusalem while having the recent events near Antioch in mind was deemed too risky, so they valiantly decided to meet the Muslims on the open field. Fatimid envoys soon arrived requesting that the Crusaders surrender the city, yet Godfrey turned down their request straight away and began to muster his troops. He faced a number of challenges though. Leading up to the capture of Jerusalem, a common goal kept the Crusaders united. Now, with the city fallen, it wasn't an easy task to reignite the will to fight, even on the brink of another encounter. But what proved more critical was that Robert Curthose and Raymond, who were still in trouble with Godfrey, refused to join the assembling army and stood aside in Jericho. Their troops made up about a third of the total Crusader army, and this wasn't good news for Godfrey.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of Crusaders that did their mission and want to take a break, but then have a power struggle of them being pissed that they didn't get the crown, even though he was stupid to refuse it in the first place. And they want to meet them in the field. Now, this isn't technically a bad idea, because they realize Jerusalem is not on the sea. They can't get supplied easily, and that army is going to actually surround Jerusalem, and they can't fight a siege and win, right? So, they're going to try and meet them in the field, which isn't a bad idea, considering what has happened in the last basically 3 episodes that we've watched. The knights at this time should be able to kick their cavalry's ass and win. It just depends, but we're having a whole bunch of power struggles right now.
Without their units, the chances to defeat the enemy and retain Jerusalem were minimal. There was a serious concern that the capture of Jerusalem would be the last significant achievement of the united Christian army. The stalemate between the lords lasted for days, with no hope in sight of a peaceful conclusion. Yet the beginning of August brought an update on the Fatimids' positions. One of the Crusade leaders, Tancred, managed to capture Arab scouts when patrolling the Palestinian coast, and soon found out that Al-Afdal was concentrating his troops near the port city of Ascalon, some 60 kilometers southwest of Jerusalem. When news reached Godfrey, he knew that it was time to decide. On the 9th of August, the Crusader army marched out of Jerusalem, heading to the coast. Backed only by troops of Tancred and Robert of Flanders, Godfrey urged Raymond and Robert of Normandy for the last time to join his army. The latter two still hesitated, waiting for reports of their own scouts. But being pressured by the rank and file, they eventually decided to give up personal animosities and reinforced Godfrey's expedition.
Yeah, the soldiers are like, bro, you need to do this or we're kicking your ass. It makes sense, right? Because he's actually assembled an army, he's like going to meet them and they want to fight. So.
For a common weal. 2 days later, the expedition vanguard encountered an unusually large herd of animals roaming the nearby fields. Muslim captives taken by Tancred explained that this was bait for the Crusaders to scatter around and start foraging, thus becoming easy prey for the Fatimid army. Godfrey obviously didn't take the bait and ordered to herd animals along their way instead. The scouts soon brought fresh reports of the fact.
And the reason they do that is basically you have walking meat bags. Walking meat bags that you don't have to, you know. What we don't understand back then is like you can't just have provisions every like to just last forever. Keeping them alive is a very good way of keeping the provisions good. They did this on ships until with the late 1800s. They have chickens on the ship, pigs on the ship, and they kill and then eat, right? Because they're alive. They're basically walking provisions. It's not a bad idea to herd them and move them. It slows your army down, obviously, because you have to move cows and whatever.
Fatimid host. Camping outside Ascalon, the Muslim force counted possibly more than 20,000 men, an army twice as numerous as the Latin one. By comparison, the Frankish lords commanded 1,200 knights and 9,000 infantry, just a fraction of the huge army which departed Constantinople in 1097.
It is, and this army has proven itself time and time again to be able to beat off bigger enemies. 700 knights basically broke off an entire army. So I wouldn't be too worried about the numbers disadvantage, considering how experienced this army is. And they have basically heavy cavalry, some light infantry, and these are all heavy infantry, and you got some cows.
Yet 2 hard years full of sieges, battles, and daily difficulties created tough and fierce troops with plenty of experience and fighting potential.
That's what I'm talking about, right? Because they've been fighting this long. These guys that are here are still very hardened.
In the evening of the 11th of August, camp was set several kilometers north to Ascalon. The Crusade leaders gathered and agreed to perform a sudden attack at dawn of the next day, hoping to diminish the numerical advantage Al-Afdal had over the European forces. Just before sunrise, the Crusader army marched out to encounter the Fatimids. They formed a double line with infantry on the front line and all remaining cavalry placed behind on the flanks of the second line. Raymond and Godfrey commanded the right and left flank respectively, while the center was held by the Normans under Tancred and both Roberts.
I like how they still have the goddamn cows with them. But yeah, no, this is a really shit position to be in. I can't believe they didn't form up no, they're about to get destroyed.
Al-Afdal had expected the Crusaders to hole up in Jerusalem and didn't perform extensive scouting.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's where you fail. Your commander's like, I expect them to sit in Jerusalem and sit on their ass. Again, the common saying of the enemy always has a say is about to bite him in the ass.
Soon, the clouds of dust appearing on the horizon made him realize what a terrible mistake he had made. An audacious attack commanded by Godfrey caught the Fatimids almost completely by surprise. Animals herded behind battle lines caused even more dust and multiplied the psychological impact of this sudden charge.
That's funny. The cows made more dust, so they thought there was more of them. That's actually pretty funny and tactically useful, but
Hastily amassed Muslim units were struck by charging Christians and strived to maintain a provisional defense, hoping to stop them long enough for the rest of the Egyptian forces to regroup and join the fight. Yet their considerably undermanned battle lines soon gave ground to the pushing Norman infantry and eventually got overwhelmed. Though some of the Fatimid light cavalry managed to break through and challenge the Christian second line, this small success could not turn the tide of the battle, and they were soon routed. Frankish knights wreaked havoc on the unprepared Muslim flanks, penetrating deeply into their camp. Soon, after a short yet violent fight, the Fatimids' organized defense collapsed, and the survivors rushed back to Ascalon, seeking safety within the city walls. The Crusader victory was total. Al-Afdal lost more than 10,000 men, and though he survived the battle, his military potential was crippled. The terrified Ascalonian garrison saw the fierceness of the European soldiers and agreed to surrender, but only to the noble Count Raymond, who had already shown some mercy to Muslim defenders during Jerusalem's siege.
which makes sense. If you kill everyone in a goddamn siege and you're like, I want them to actually surrender, it can work. It can also backfire. If you kill everyone, they'll be like, okay, well, we can't surrender. If you let them surrender and don't kill them all, then yeah, they're more likely to surrender. It's a balancing game you have to play.
Yet Godfrey intervened and broke down negotiations. as passing Ascalon to Raymond would result in close competition between the two in the area. Thus, Ascalon remained in Fatimid hands and served as a bridgehead to many Muslim attacks on the Crusader states in the 50 years to come.
Yeah, that's dumb. Because we all know, well, you know what happens is basically Jerusalem falls. But yeah, not taking the city would be basically dumb. Also the cow.
The victors rode back to Jerusalem, laden with treasuries from the Fatimid camp. Dealing with the direct threat of the Caliphate allowed Godfrey to extend his rule over the surroundings of the Holy City and proclaim the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Summer of the year 1099 was coming to an end, and with all the nearby threats disposed, the majority of the Crusade participants sailed back to Europe in glory. Just around 300 knights decided to remain in the Holy Land and reinforce the foundation of the Crusader state in the Middle East. The news about the successful reclaiming of Jerusalem soon spread across Christian Europe, heavily influencing its medieval culture and attracting many new pilgrims willing to defend the Holy Land.
Yes, let's talk about that. So 1,200 knights, 300 stay. This is what happened after the Crusades. After the first Crusade, the only successful one, really, a lot of the guys left to go back to, what they were doing with their houses, their noble lands. Basically, nobody really stayed there, and this continues to be a problem for the King of Jerusalem. It's just there's not enough people that come over there that actually live there enough and then stay there and become Palestinian, and Antiochian or was another ethnicity. But yeah, so that's what happens there. Crusaders looted an exceptional amount of booty from the Fatimid Caliphate. It was reported that Al-Hifada encrusted sword was sold at a great amount of 60 golden bezants. Wow, bezants. I don't know this currency. Wow. Godfrey didn't have an opportunity to rule Jerusalem for long. He died a year later in unclear circumstances. Soon after Godfrey's death, his brother Baldwin was summoned from Edessa to rule Jerusalem. Yeah, so if he would have accepted the surrender of the city, he wouldn't have mattered anyway. He died anyway, so maybe Raymond would have took over then instead of Baldwin. A few days after, wow, don't worry, I do that too. A few days after Jerusalem fell into Crusader hands, the relic of the true cross was found by Arnulfler, first patriarch of the Holy City. It quickly became the most sacred relic of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, even though Arnulfler tortured Orthodox Christians to force them to reveal its location. Of course, reveal the relic of the true cross. Anyway, if you guys like this reaction, leave me a like. Otherwise, go down below, and my stuff's there, and go down below and show Baz Battle some support. All right. So, other than that, you people have a nice day.